All right, guys, back on Southeastern 16 with Max Barr. We continue our SEC basketball season previews for the 24-25 season. Max, SEC Media Day, just around the corner next week.
Ooh.
And we are on to our next team here as we are trying to move quickly through these. Of course, football season, too, so we get a little behind sometimes. But the Auburn Tigers are up next, and for everyone who has watched, listened to our stuff, knows that we were talking a lot about Auburn at the end of last season. The tear they went on winning the SEC tournament, and obviously did not get the results they wanted in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But you get some guys coming back. One in particular that's going to be certainly getting all the attention in Johni Broome, but a very old roster, I think, for Bruce Pearl here. He's got a lot of experienced players. Got some talent, and the expectations should be high yet again there on the Plains.
Yeah, Blake, no revenge here from me after I picked Auburn to win it all. I think that was that was my own doing there. If you're looking at Auburn to win it all again this year, they are actually 11th in the national odds right now, so they are way up there. You're probably not going to get the best odds. I think BetOnline right now has 33-1 if you like that, but right up there in the top 10 in the nation. And then to win the SEC, they're second, right behind Alabama. Only 100 cents behind Alabama. Alabama's plus 200 to win the SEC. Auburn at plus 300. Really not too far behind if you want to translate odds to mathematical percentages. Really not that much of a difference. So right up there again, Blake.
Yep, that's we had them in our summer power rankings, our composite staff rankings. It was Alabama 1, Auburn 2. And
Yep.
we'll see if Auburn holds there once we do maybe our official preseason rankings here, maybe in a week or two, is my guess here on the channel. But let's
Yeah, a
talk
few
about it
weeks.
because, again, yeah, I think we're going to have some interesting discussions on the Tigers here because, as always, we'll go through backcourt, frontcourt, pick our X factors, team MVPs, give you our predictions for the Tigers heading into the season. But we do start with the backcourt because I think, Max, that's where things are the most interesting because
Yeah.
we kind of know what to expect from the front court, and we'll get to that in a minute because you've got a lot of familiar faces there.
Mm-hmm.
But backcourt, you are going to have some new guys added to the mix as you're going to have JP Pegues joining. You've got Tahaad Pettiford there. Miles Kelly comes over from Georgia Tech. But then you've got the one sort of remaining guy there in Denver Jones who played a key role for this team last year. And I think as you look at this roster, it would be my prediction that they're definitely going to need to rely on him in terms of not only handling the ball, but also just in terms of being able to make shots from the perimeter. Because as we'll talk about, that is something I think as you look at this team, curious to see how much 3-point production they
Mm-hmm.
get roster wise. For everyone that's going to be in the rotation. Remember, Auburn did shoot. They shot about 35% last year, which that wound up being close to about 100th nationally. They finished 109 in that category, which is not bad at all when you consider where Auburn was at in previous years. But that's the thing I'm most intrigued by, Max, with this backcourt. I'm curious to see what they get from from a shooting standpoint, but also I think this is one of those where those four guys we talk about there, the distribution of minutes, I think is
Mm-hmm.
going to be fascinating with these four here.
Yeah, kind of what we were thinking all off season was that JP Pegues was locked into that point guard spot, and we would have been hearing really good things about Tahaad Pettiford. Tahaad Pettiford just kept coming up this off season with reports out of practice. He looks amazing. He's jumping through the roof. But recently, it's been said that Denver Jones is going to be the guy to start. Zep Jasper, ex Auburn point guard. Well, more combo guard, but whatever you want to call it, backcourt member. He's been at practice past few days, whole week, been at Auburn practice. Said Denver Jones, if the season ended today, Denver Jones is our PG1. And that took me by surprise. I think, but when you look at it, it's not all too far-fetched, Blake. You have JP Pegues, who's, coming from Furman. SEC is a big step up. Pegues is a little bit thinner, a little bit smaller. I think he's about 180-ish. And Denver Jones is up above 200. So you have that. And then also I think Pegues is struggling a little bit with his left hand. I think they're noticing a little bit of weaknesses, but also he can light it up. I mean, the guy, he's a great passer. He's a great shooter. He's a clutch shooter. We've seen that. So it's not all negative for Pegues. I think it's just going to take a little bit longer than maybe from day one. He's locked in right away. Expect some big things from Denver Jones here. And also Miles Kelly has been surprising as well with his shooting. But a little bit different than we thought, Blake. A little bit of a curveball there.
Well, I mean, look, you and I were talking about this before we started recording, and as said, specifically with Miles Kelly, I mean, the percentages have been up and down a little bit in terms of,
Yeah.
The numbers. And you look at last year, he shot 32% from three, shot 38% from three the year before. Even the field goal percentage numbers certainly took a dip last year as well. But we always say, too, sometimes that can just be a product of your role on the team and other teams knowing that you're, one of the top guys, and it's going to make it harder to get easier shots. And so, again, I think that's what's going to be interesting here to see exactly, okay, if you're picking the top three scorers on this team, I don't know. Like, I mean, Broome's going to be one of them.
Right.
Denver Jones is probably going to be one of them. Then it's like, is it Kelly? Is it Baker-Mazara? Those are probably your most likely options, right? I mean, I would think that's the order you're probably going in. So, yeah, I'm curious to see if Kelly can take a step forward in terms of the shooting. Again, even at 35 to 38%, I think you'll take that for a team that's going to be able to use the physicality of the front court to do a lot of things. But then with Denver Jones, like you mentioned, I mean, this is someone who I think you look back last year and really, I mean, had a hot finish to the season.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he scored in double figures, and I want to say it was 7 of their last 8 games last year. Played his best basketball, I think, once they got to SEC play. And yeah, so I think they're definitely going to have to rely on him there. But we know he can do it, and I think it's just going to be interesting to see kind of the role that he plays on this particular team. Again, given the fact that he may be thrust into this role where he has to, certainly have the ball in his hands quite a bit. But before we continue, Max, let's tell you about our friends at Bet Online. You were talking about the odds earlier, and if you want to place an odd, place a bet, that is, on one of these teams, Auburn specifically, to win the SEC, win the national championship, you can do that with our friends at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform, and your number one source for everything football and, of course, college basketball. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. If you know your stuff, you can get on that $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week. We keep telling you about it. $200,000, folks. Weekly prizes and a share of that cash there. When the game's over, head over to the online casino, play some blackjack or poker. Plus, you can unwind with over 150 slots games as well. Head to the website today, get on the action, put those futures bets out on the Tigers. You can even bet on your Johni Broome 3-point prop bets, like Max Barr infamously did last year at the SEC tournament. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right, Max. Again, we talk about kind of the backcourt and how it's going to play out there. Now, you do kind of start to look at, the front court, and we're going to, certainly group guys like Chad Baker-Mazara, Chris Moore, those kind of guys into this. But, of course, if you're talking about the front court, you're talking about Johni Broome leading the way, Dylan Cardwell in terms of the size. Those are your two biggest guys. Broome coming back. I mean, he could very well be the best player in the country next season, one of the top 3, easily 5 maybe. I mean, it's just... yeah, like he's one of the best that's out there. And so that's always a great starting point. But as you and I have talked about, I think this is where you kind of have that breakout range. Chaney Johnson, our guy Gene on Twitter, I know wants us to mention Chaney Johnson and the potential breakout candidacy for this young man heading into the season. But yeah, I mean, clearly, I think the depth is on full display in the front court. You're led by an All-American, SEC Player of the Year guy. And yeah, I think now we just kind of see again what the rotation looks like. But physicality, I think, is going to reign supreme here. Rim protection, rebounding. Auburn's going to be just fine in that area.
Yeah, before I dive in here to the big guys, Miles Kelly might be able to help out here a little bit as well. And very underrated stat for Miles Kelly, he had a defensive rebounding percentage of 17% in ACC play last year. That's a sample size of 20 games in ACC play. So that's not just some random, he had a few good rebounding games. This guy is 6'6". He is a very good defensive rebounder, not just good. You want to look at some of Auburn's numbers from last year for defensive rebounding. Jay Will was 12.5. Cardwell was 13.7. Semo was 6.2. I mean, Miles Kelly is going to be one of the best defensive rebounders on this team. And he might be playing the 2, might be playing a little bit of the 3. So the rebounding might take a big step up here where it's not really being talked about. But jumping into the front court, I mean, Blake, what do you want to say? I mean, it's the best big man in the nation, and Johni Broome. I'm gonna like to see. I like how you joked about his 3-point prop, but that is a topic of discussion here because there's that, are we going to see Broome at the 4 a little bit? Are we going to see a little Broome Cardwell action when Chaney Johnson's not on the floor? Because that is a big question, is what do the non-Chaney Johnson minutes look like? Do we get a little bit of the freshman Ja'Kai Howard? Do we get, is it going to be Chris Moore, Semo, Jaheim Hudson, the transfer? Like, what are those non-Chaney Johnson minutes going to look like? That's a question I have. But as long as Johni Broome is on the floor, you've got one of the best front courts in the nation. And just looking at the big men that left the game last year, no Edey, no Kalkbrenner, no Klingon, a lot of these like nationally relevant big guys. When you get to March Madness, I mean, who's Broome going to look at and be like, oh, I'm not going to own this matchup? I mean, there's like, I don't know who.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's interesting is like there were a lot of good big men that left the SEC after this year. Whether it was, I mean, like you mentioned, I mean, there's just quite a few guys. Whether it's Tolu Smith, Tyrese Samuel, I know there's going to be guys that I'm going to forget, but you just keep going down the line, and
big bodies.
Yeah, like big bodies that have to be replaced, and so yeah, I think that's going to be interesting too to see how that plays out in terms of knowing that he's going to be, I think the best big man in the conference, and certainly, again, one of the best big men in the nation. And you know how teams are going to game plan for Auburn, but you just kind of look at the consistency in terms of what they've done. I mean, I think 6 out of the last 7 years they finished in the top 15 in block percentage defense. So, like, they're going to block a lot of shots. We know that. And yeah, like it's going to be very physical in the paint when you're trying to score against this team. When you just look at the defensive numbers, they're top 25. They were I think they were first in effective field goal percentage defense last year. But that's really been a big key to them winning so many games the past several years. So, I think you have to remember, like we're a Cinderella upset away from looking at this team, I think, much differently in terms of like the momentum coming in as a program, because we remember how good they were to finish the season last year, and you're getting key pieces back. I just think, we can't forget that. But all right, Max, as we continue on here, we pick our X Factor and team MVP. I mean, we usually go X Factor, team MVP, but I think one's going to be much less dramatic than the other. I mean, I think we're pretty much in agreement that Johni Broome is going to be our pick for team MVP here.
I think you're crazy if you don't do that.
Yeah. I think you should take that bet. If you find it at Bet Online, team MVP for Auburn. I don't think they have that, but I'm going to bet on Johni Broome as my team MVP. But I think the X Factor one is a lot more interesting because,
it is.
Again, you mentioned all the reasons why it could be this guy or that guy or whatever, but I'm going to stick with the player that I think, and I hate to keep bringing this up, but it is, like, if you think about how different a game can be played if a certain player is on the floor, well, I mean, Chad Baker-Mazara to me is a great example of that because of, certainly seeing how that one game played out. But when you think about just the impact he has on the game, and I think he's the guy that, with how the roster is constructed, like if you're looking at one guy, I think that is going to be so crucial in multiple areas, whether it is a guy who can step out and knock down a three when they need him to do it, whether it's a guy that's going to grab some rebounds, can block shots, he can do everything. Like, I think that's kind of what it comes down to with him. I just think that he's the X factor on this team, and I think you could have argued he was the X factor last year, but I don't think that changes this year. I think that just, again, given what we know in terms of the confidence in the front court, even if you have a few questions in terms of what the backcourt rotation is going to look like, to me, the role that he plays as someone who can play multiple positions and do so many things, I think he's the X factor for the Tigers again this season.
Yeah, Zep Jasper gave the same answer as you. He said it's got to be Chad Baker, just with everything you just said, how versatile he is, and we did see what it's like when he's not there. So I'll give you a different answer because I think that that Chad is a great one. I'm going Chaney Johnson, and I'm going Chaney because if he doesn't pan out, if he doesn't take this sophomore leap in the SEC, that 4 spot is just looking vacant. It's like now we're going to really have to change things up. Do we have to play Chad Baker in a small ball 4 role? Do we have to bump Johni Broome down and kind of play some games with Broome and Cardwell? I feel like that in the other spots, in the 1, 2, 3, and even the 5, you can play little games. You can switch Cardwell and Broome out, and you can play games with Pegues, Denver, but Pettiford, Miles Kelly, and stuff. But that 4 spot, it's like Chaney, we need you. And so that's my X factor because I don't know what it looks like if he doesn't pan out.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he's that Swiss Army knife guy
Yeah.
that just has to be there. I think for them to make a run, not just towards an SEC title potentially, but towards anything in March in terms of I think getting to the second weekend and beyond, it's got to be getting multiple contributions in different areas. I think from him. So good thing is he's proven he can do it time and time again, and so we'll see how it plays out. All right, now we get to the interesting. One more thing, Max.
What were you going to say? What's the interesting?
No, I'm curious where you were going to go.
I was going to just talk a little bit about the scheduling because this non-conference schedule
Mm-hmm.
is unbelievable. And I mentioned earlier how Auburn might be a little bit concerned with JP Pegues' physicality. Well, you're not going to be worrying very long because you got non-con games against Houston, you got Iowa State, you've got Duke. Now, just those 3 right there, I would be willing to place a bet that all 3 of those teams are in the top 15 in defensive efficiency come the end of the season. I mean, I think Duke's the tallest team in the country. I don't even know if they're going to play a guy under 6'5". They're massive. Iowa State, we know Iowa State's defense is, and Houston, obviously. So if you have any concern about Auburn and the physicality and if these transfers or freshmen are going to gel, it's going to be apparent very quick. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think I was reading something. I think Justin Ferguson put on the Auburn Observer his recent quote from Bruce Pearl about basically made it very simple. Like we're going to get exposed. Like by
Yeah.
this non-conference schedule, it's going to tell us exactly who we are, and it's going to expose certain things. And like we know that. Like that's what coaches want. Like they want to be
Yes.
able to see what they need to do to be ready for March, and Auburn is going to have a very clear indication of that. I think Auburn and Alabama are the 2 teams in the SEC that will know exactly where they stand after the non-conference.
Yep.
We talked to Jon Rothstein, and he said he thought Auburn's the toughest he's seen maybe in terms of
Yeah.
this non-conference schedule they're going to play. So they will absolutely get exposed in certain areas. And I think that's good because you have to see what you need to work on, and I think that kind of sets into the prediction of what they can do this season because I think they have what it takes to win the SEC. If you're looking at the high range of potential options, I think certainly that's the case. But if you're looking at, okay, if it doesn't go right, I think it's very clear. Like, if it goes wrong and they don't get to maybe where we think they can get, it's probably going to be the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
I think if they don't shoot the ball well from outside, teams figure out how to, we're just going to double team Johni Broome and we're going to see if they can beat us in terms of putting up a lot of threes. I think that is something that we'll see how teams game plan around that. But again, it could also be Miles Kelly's shooting goes way up, and we know Denver Jones can shoot, Baker-Mazara can shoot, and all of a sudden that's all taken care of. But I think that's the thing, Max, is I'm curious to see consistency in terms of the 3-point shooting, but they've also proven before that they don't need it to win 25 plus games. I mean, they weren't a great shooting team several years ago, and they were fine. And I think the backcourt rotation to me, like I think you have to have one of those guys step up beyond Jones,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that is Kelly who turns into an all SEC type player. But I think Pegues, Pettiford, I think you've got to have at least one of those guys be a reliable, contributor. I think on a 9 in 9 out basis, just knowing the physicality of the league, foul trouble, those kind of things. So yeah, I mean, I don't think this. I mean, look, I don't think it's a team that misses the tournament. I mean, like in worst case scenario, I just don't think that's the case. I really don't. But if there's something that pushes Auburn outside of the top 5 of the SEC, which by the way, they could be 6th and still be a top 20 team probably nationally.
Yep.
That to me those are some of the things that could do it.
No, yeah, I don't have much of a different thought process on it. I think one thing that I'm a little bit worried about is the non-Johni Broome minutes, because I mean the guy's not going to play 40 minutes a game, and we're going to see real quick, like in that Houston game, that in the first week of the season, like is it going to be like, oh boy, Johni Broome just went out and we just got outscored by 17 in 3 minutes. I'm exaggerating, but something like that where it's like Broome cannot be out of this game at all, because the offense just gets stuck in the mud and they're pounding the paint when he's not in the game. Something like that where I'd be like, okay, I'm seeing the concern now. They are very reliant on Johni Broome, because last year Jaylin Williams would be able to kind of shoulder that paint load when Broome was out with Cardwell. You could still dump it down to Jaylin Williams and he could bully anyone. I don't know if they can do that this year. And so I think that's one thing I'm interested to see is how reliant are we going to be on Johni Broome? And that's what I'm nervous about in these first few games against a Houston and Iowa State, a Duke. You're going to need some physicality. So I think the physicality and the rebounding from Jay Will, that's what I think could potentially knock this team down. I know there's a lot of concern about the backcourt, and we spent a good amount of time on it. I'm not that worried, I'll be honest. You've got Denver Jones and Baker-Mazara, who's got a season in already. Miles Kelly, it was a top 20 ACC scorer the past 2 seasons. Interesting to see how the percentages will play out, but I'm not all that worried. My main worry is the lack of Jay Will and what the team looks like without Broome on the floor. But yeah, I don't think this team misses the tournament. I don't see it.
No, I think, again, if you can find your bet online bet somewhere, if there's a bet that gives you great odds on Auburn finishing in the top 5 of the SEC, I would take those no matter probably what the number looks like. I think it's going to be hard for them to finish outside of it. But again, this is a very strong league. And again, if Bruce Pearl talking about the team getting exposed in non-conference play, if they lose some of these games and we start to look up and you're like, oh, that may be something they can't fix quickly, then that can happen. But they could also come out, and we're talking about Auburn as the number 1 team in the country, mid-December after they win some of these games. And, that's just kind of the nature of seeing how it plays out with a lot of new pieces. And that's the era where, you have some new pieces that are going to be thrust into some of these roles. But the good news for Auburn, I think, is that they do have such a good nucleus coming back. And some teams cannot say that because they have all new rosters. So, we'll see how it plays out. There you go. Our thoughts on the Auburn Tigers heading into the 24-25 season. Of course, we're previewing every SEC basketball team heading into the new season. So hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well. And we want to, again, let you guys know we're covering this wall to wall. Like, we love SEC basketball. We know we do a lot of football stuff here. But yeah, you guys know how we cover basketball. And
it's coming
back for another season.
It's coming
to do it. So there you go. All right. We appreciate you guys watching and or listening as always. And we'll talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 6.